in the legally binding undertakings that the company had given him about the future. Indeed, at that time, Melrose were falling over themselves to assure everybody of their commitment to manufacturing in the UK. For example, on the 13th of March last year, Melrose Chief Executive Simon Peckham wrote to my honourable friend, the member for Leeds West, as chair of the BEIS Select Committee, setting out particularly clearly what they asked us to believe about their intentions. He said the company's commitments included, and I quote, returning GKN to be a British manufacturing powerhouse competitive on the global stage, committed to innovation, investing in skills, R&D and productivity to support the industrial strategy, and working with suppliers and customers to boost Britain's industrial base and the wider economy. Now, on 5th of April, just a year since Mr Peckham wrote that letter, workers at GKN Aerospace plant in my Kings Norton constituency were told that what these assurances meant for them. GKN management announced that the plant is to be run down over the next 2 years and closed altogether in 2021 with the loss of over 170 jobs. Now, the company says that the work undertaken by the factory will be transferred to, their words, other GKN Aerospace sites or, and again their words, low-cost areas. And by low-cost areas, I think we can safely assume the company means areas overseas.
Was it Alexander Wynne?
Indeed.
I thank you for giving way, Mr Deputy Speaker. And does the honourable member not believe that this breach of faith cannot go on challenged by this House and by the Minister, lest every other big business who reap the benefits of government contracts, government funding and government subsidy decide that they too can go against their word and move their work to Morocco or Mexico or elsewhere, that allows shareholders to reap the benefits whilst our own hard-working men and women that he is referring to, and a good hard-working MP is, are wondering how on earth they can keep their homes and feed their families.
The honourable gentleman is quite right, and I thank him for his kind words. This is a breach of faith. It does need to be challenged, and I hope that when he replies to the debate, the Minister will assure us that it's not only backbenchers on this side of the House that are challenging the decision, but the government will as well.
The honourable friend give way.
Yes.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way. Although there's mentions that 170 jobs, you've got to multiply that by 2 or 3, because you've got the supply chain. This is where the figures can be utterly misleading. But I'm sure my honourable friend will recall that when we first debated this in the House, we raised the issue about national security, the whole question about the defence industries here, and despite the assurances that ministers have got, these companies haven't honoured that. There's a whole pattern here about asset stripping in this country, not only with this company, but with other companies as well. And I think it's about time the government got tough with some of these companies and refused, from time to time, look at the whole questions of national security here, because I've worked in the defence industry and I know what it means.
My honourable friend is quite right to raise the question of national security. It was raised last year, and it's something that I'll make some reference to later in my speech, because GKN Aerospace Kings Norton manufactures windscreens and windows and other transparencies for military as well as civilian aircraft. Now, yes.
Honourable friend, forgive me, he's making a very important point. This isn't just simply constrained to the defence industry. This is asset stripping as a wider impact across our manufacturing base. And if this government is serious about growing our industrial base and our manufacturing capability in this country, it better get a grip of these things very quickly and actually insist that there's statutory provision and legislation that backs up obligations on private capital to deliver the national interest. Does he agree with that?
My honourable friend makes a good point, and I do hope that we hear some fairly strong statements from the Minister, not just about what they're saying about this, but what they're going to do about it. Now, of course, last year, Melrose hadn't only to reassure the Select Committee of their intentions, they also provided a series of undertakings to ministers. And in his statement to the House on 24th of April, as I say, 1 year to the day before this debate, the Business Secretary declared, and I quote, "I look to management to honour its commitments in both the spirit and the letter, and to create a strong future for GKN, its employees, its suppliers and the industrial sectors in which it will play a major role. He added that, and I quote, "Melrose has also agreed to meet my officials and me every 6 months to provide updates on its ownership of GKN." Now, in the light of all that, you might expect ministers to have told the company this month that rather than close Kings Norton, it expected the company to honour the spirit as well as the letter of the undertakings it had given. Instead of that, though, in a written answer to me on 16th of April, I was informed that the Secretary of State had been told that the closure plan was the result of, and I quote, "an internal strategic review by GKN," and that, and again I quote, "this is a commercial decision for GKN Aerospace and not in contravention of the deed of covenant agreed between BEIS and Melrose." So my first question to the Minister is this: if Melrose have indeed been meeting its officials every 6 months as promised, has anything at all been said in those meetings about the future of the Kings Norton plant being in doubt? If so, what alternatives to closure did BEIS urge on Melrose, and what was the company's response to those suggestions? And if not, what on earth is the point of these 6 monthly reviews if they're not expected to cover an issue as important as the closure of a plant? Now, of course, BEIS is not the only government department with which Melrose entered a deed of covenant last year. The Business Secretary also told the House last year that the Ministry of Defence had received undertakings that would, and I quote, "prevent the disposal of a business, components of a business, or assets without the consent of the government." Now, the Kings Norton plant produces windscreens and windows for military as well as civilian aircraft. So can we assume that the MOD will now step in? Apparently not. A written answer from that department on 15th of April told me that as defence work is being, quotes, "moved, not stopped," close quotes, the Secretary of State for Defence would not be issuing a notice of concern under the Covenant. Now, I'm assuming the Minister has spoken to his colleagues at the MOD before this debate. So can he tell me if GKN have made unambiguous commitments to retain in the UK all defence-related work undertaken by the Kings Norton plant? And what have they said about how they plan to dispose of the Kings Norton plant after closure? No doubt when he replies to the debate, the Minister will tell me about the various investments that GKN has announced in its aerospace and automotive divisions at other plants in the UK, and I welcome those investments. However, for employees at GKN Aerospace Kings Norton, the first that they knew that the company plans to close their plant was when they were told on 5th of April this year. That is simply not good enough, and it is a breach of faith with what Melrose said last year. If the company believes there is a profitability issue at Kings Norton, shouldn't ministers be telling them that the spirit of the undertakings given last year means that they should first discuss the situations and the options for the future with the trade unions representing their employees before decisions are made, not simply inform them after decisions are made? And when Melrose said last year that their mission was to, quote, "power the government's industrial strategy to secure, in their words, the best outcomes for employees, suppliers and customers and the wider economy," isn't it reasonable to ask them what assessment they have made of the impact of closing the Kings Norton plant on the local economy, a point that my honourable friend made a little earlier? Has BEIS asked the company that question, and if so, what has been the company's response? In conclusion, therefore, I do not believe GKN now telling the government that they've conducted a strategic review is satisfactory. And will ministers accept the need to press the company further on, number one, how GKN have reached this decision, number two, what alternatives have been or still could be considered, number three, what in detail is going to happen to the defence work carried out at Kings Norton, and how does GKN plan to dispose of the asset that is the Kings Norton plant? And finally, what impact in practice will closing Kings Norton have on the industrial strategy in Birmingham? Without clear and convincing answers on these points, I ask the Minister to join me and join other honourable members in saying that Melrose and GKN should think again.